In our last session, I read a letter from a man who was irritated that his brother and parents were constantly interrupting his conversations. I suggested that he revise the way he saw his brother. I suggested that he see his brother as drowning and using praise and power, rather than seeing his brother as doing something personally to him. I also suggested that if the writer of the letter were less empty and afraid himself, if he did what it took to get more real love, he wouldn't be as bothered by his brother's behavior. But does this mean that he has to be a doormat? Does he have to put up with his brother interrupting him all the time? No, not at all. And now let's get back to addressing the writer of the letter. When people have run over you all your life, the tendency is to want to tell them about it. I'm sure that part of you wants to say to your brother, "Martin, look, I'm tired of you interrupting me all the time. It's rude, and I want you to stop." Good luck with that. Telling people how their behavior is wrong and how they should change it tends to work very poorly, really. Do not give in to the temptation to do this. If you tell your brother that his behavior is rude, he will defend himself, and any chance of a productive conversation will be over. So, what can you do? Don't address the entire pattern of Martin's behavior. That's way too much for most people to hear. Just address each occasion. For example, let's say that you're describing an event, and your brother leaps in to tell a story of a similar event in his own life. He loves to do that because he loves the attention. So now you have a decision to make. First question I'd ask is this story important to me? If it's not, let it go. But don't resent the interruption. Just drop it. But don't let it happen all the time, or you'll become a doormat. Eventually, you have to make a decision to finish a story. Eventually, the story must matter a little, or you wouldn't have begun telling it in the first place, right? So, when he interrupts you, you hold up your hand, just like this, as though you were a traffic cop. Very few people find this an offensive gesture, and yet it does catch people's attention. Notice that I'm not holding up my hand as though I'm asking for permission. I'm holding it up in such a way that I'm stopping the conversation. Then you say, "Martin, I'm dying to hear your story, but I wasn't finished with mine, and I'd like to finish it. Would that be all right?" At that point, most people will let you finish your story. He might offer an excuse like, "Oh, I thought you were done." That's very common. Or, "I was just," whatever, telling you about something that had happened. In other words, "I was just being rude." Ignore the excuse. He was just being rude. Then finish your story. It would be most unusual for him to insist on finishing. But if he does, at some point, you have to decide whether you want to remain a doormat for life. You cannot do any of this with anger, or it just turns into a war of getting and protecting behaviors and everybody loses. Everybody. If he continues past the point of your saying what I've suggested, you hold your hand up again and say, "Martin, I was talking. Is there any particular reason that your story is more important than mine?" Now notice, you're not trying to control him. You're trying to finish your story. Very few people would continue if you did this. If they did, you'd have to decide whether you really want to stay around people like this, because they'd be telling you pretty clearly that they don't care about you at all. It all comes down to this. See people in a loving way. Get as much love as you can. And you can still make decisions about what you want to do in a loving way, as in the case here with your brother. It's always about real love.